The Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent, and fear hung in the air like a heavy fog that refused to lift. High Counselor Zevran stood at the center of the great hall, his forearms trembling as he read the latest reports from the warfront. And every word brought more despair to his heart. 12 star systems had fallen in 3 months, and the Dominion showed no signs of stopping their brutal advance across the galaxy. "We have lost contact with the Peleron homeworld," announced the communications officer. Her voice breaking as she delivered the news. Zevran closed his eyes and let out a long breath, knowing that billions of lives had just been erased from existence, and there was nothing he could do to save them. The Council represented over 200 species, but none of them possessed the military strength to stand against the Dominion war machine Archon. Kethra had built his empire on conquest and destruction, and he viewed the Council as nothing more than weak prey waiting to be devoured. "What options do we have left?" asked Counselor Siron, her scales shifting colors with anxiety as she looked around the chamber. No one answered because everyone knew the truth. And the truth was that they were running out of time, and hope. Zevran turned to the ancient archives displayed on the wall behind him, scrolling through records that dated back 10,000 years. "There is one possibility," he said quietly. Almost afraid to speak the words out loud, the other counselors leaned forward, desperate for any glimmer of hope in this darkest hour. "The humans," Zevran continued. And the chamber erupted in whispers and gasps of disbelief. "The humans are myths," shouted Counselor Vethrak, slamming his fist against his desk with frustration. "They are stories we tell our children to help them sleep at night. Nothing more than ancient fairy tales." Zevran raised his hand for silence and pulled up the oldest records in the archive. Documents that had survived the collapse of 3 civilizations 10,000 years ago. During the First Shadow War, a species called humans fought alongside our ancestors, he explained. They came from a small planet in an uncharted region of space, and they helped save the galaxy from destruction. And then they vanished, added historian Yelvan, stepping forward from the back of the chamber. The records say they retreated to their home system to rebuild and heal from the war, promising to return if the galaxy ever needed them again. Counselor Siron shook her head in disbelief, unable to accept what she was hearing. "You want us to base our survival on legends?" she demanded. "On stories that are older than most of our civilizations." "I want us to try everything before we accept annihilation," Zevran replied firmly. "If there is even the smallest chance that humans are real, we must reach out to them." He turned to the communications array and began inputting coordinates that had been preserved in the ancient texts. "These are the last known coordinates of the human home system," he said. "I am sending a message into the void, and I am asking for help." The transmission went out into the darkness of space, carrying the desperate plea of a dying galaxy. Minutes passed in tense silence, and many counselors began to lose hope, believing that they had just wasted precious time on a foolish dream. Then, the communication console lit up with an incoming signal, and everyone in the chamber stopped breathing. "This is Ambassador Lavra Mitchell of the United Earth Government," a calm female voice announced through the speakers. "We have received your transmission, High Counselor Zevran, and we are responding." The chamber exploded in chaos as counselors shouted in shock and disbelief, unable to process what they were hearing. "Humans are real," someone screamed. "The myths are true." Zevran felt his legs weaken beneath him, and he had to grip the podium to keep himself standing. "Ambassador Mitchell," he managed to say, his voice shaking with emotion, "we thought your kind was lost to history. We thought you were only legends." There was a brief pause before the ambassador responded, and her words carried a weight that silenced every soul in the chamber. "We are not legends, High Counselor. We are humanity, and we never forgot our promise to the galaxy." Another voice joined the transmission, deeper and more commanding in tone. "This is Commander Daniel Harris of the Earth Defense Force. the man said. "We have been monitoring the Dominion's advance for several weeks now, and we have already mobilized our fleet." Zevran could hardly believe what he was hearing, and tears began to form in his ancient eyes. "You knew about the invasion?" he asked. "Why did you not contact us sooner?" "Because we wanted to be sure before we revealed ourselves," Commander Harris explained. "Humanity has been preparing for this moment for 10,000 years, and we did not want to return until we were ready to fulfill our promise." Ambassador Mitchell's voice returned, softer now but filled with determination. "High Counselor, humanity requests permission to enter Council space and engage the Dominion forces. We are asking to join this fight as your allies, just as we did in the ancient times." Zevran looked around at the other counselors, seeing hope return to faces that had been filled with despair just moments ago. "Permission granted," he said without hesitation. "And may the stars bless your arrival. Ambassador, we will reach your position within 6 standard hours," Commander Harris announced. "Tell your people to hold the line until we get there, because humanity is coming, and we do not intend to let the galaxy fall." The transmission ended, and the chamber remained frozen in stunned silence. Historian Yelvan slowly walked to the center of the room, his eyes wide with wonder and his hands trembling as he clutched his ancient texts. "The myths were true all along," he whispered. "The humans are returning, and nothing in the galaxy will ever be the same again." Zevran nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders for the first time in months. "Send word to all Council forces," he commanded. "Tell them that hope is coming. Tell them that the legends are marching to war, and somewhere in the darkness of space, 200 human warships accelerated toward Council territory, ready to remind the galaxy why humanity had become legend in the first place." The border station of Kethmire was the closest outpost to uncharted space, and today it would witness something that had not happened in 10,000 years. Station Commander Yorth stood at the observation window, his 3 eyes scanning the emptiness beyond the stars, waiting for something he still was not sure he believed in. "Sir, we are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching from Sector 7, his sensor officer reported. "The energy readings are unlike anything in our database." Yorth felt his heart pound faster as he watched the darkness of space begin to ripple and distort. Then the first ship emerged, and Yorth had to grab the railing to keep himself from falling backward in shock. The vessel was massive, easily 3 times larger than any Council warship, and its hull gleamed with a silver surface that reflected the light of distant stars. 2 more ships followed, then 5 more, then 20 more, until the space before the station was filled with an armada that seemed to have no end. "By the Ancient Ones," Yoreth whispered, unable to tear his eyes away from the sight before him. The ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, designed with smooth curves and sharp angles that spoke of both elegance and deadly purpose. "This is Captain Nathan Cole of the human battleship Endeavor," a voice announced through the station's communication system. "We are requesting permission to dock and meet with your commanding officer." Yoreth's hands were shaking so badly that he could barely press the response button. "Permission granted." "Captain Cole," he managed to say, "welcome to Kethmire." An hour later, Yoreth stood in the station's main hangar as a shuttle from the Endeavor touched down on the landing pad. The doors opened, and for the first time in his life, Yoreth saw a living human being step out into the light. Captain Nathan Cole was tall and broad-shouldered, with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him in a single glance. Behind him walked Lieutenant Megan Drake, a woman with red hair pulled back in a tight braid and a confident stride that showed no fear. Ambassador Laura Mitchell followed, dressed in formal diplomatic attire, and beside her stood Commander Daniel Harris, wearing a military uniform covered in medals and insignia. Yoreth approached them slowly, Still unable to fully accept that this was really happening. "I have studied the ancient texts my entire life," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I always believed the stories about humans were exaggerated, that no species could really be as remarkable as the legends claimed." Commander Harris smiled and extended his hand in a gesture that Yorath did not understand. "It is a handshake." Ambassador Mitchell explained gently, "A human greeting. You clasp hands as a sign of friendship and trust." Yorath reached out and took the commander's hand, feeling the warmth and strength in the human's grip. "The legends were not exaggerated," Harris said. "If anything, they did not tell the whole story." News of the human arrival spread across the galaxy within hours, and reactions ranged from joy to disbelief to outright denial in the Galactic Council chamber. Historian Yovan stood before the assembled counselors with tears streaming down his face. "I have spent my entire career being mocked for believing in humans," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "My colleagues called me a fool for studying myths and fairy tales. But I never stopped believing that the stories were true." He held up his ancient texts, the same documents that had been passed down through countless generations. These records describe humans as warriors without equal, as protectors who would give their lives for species they had never met, as beings who carried both tremendous strength and tremendous compassion in their hearts. High Counselor Zevran nodded slowly, remembering the transmission he had received just hours ago. "And now we will see if those descriptions were accurate," he said meanwhile, aboard the Dominion flagship. Arkan Kethra received the news of the human arrival with amusement rather than concern. "So the Council has decided to summon fairy tales to save them." He laughed, his deep voice echoing through his command chamber. "This is truly pathetic." Overseer Maldoy stood beside him, reviewing the sensor data from their scouts. "My lord, the human fleet numbers approximately 200 vessels," he reported. "Their technology appears to be highly advanced, perhaps even superior to our own." Kethra waved his hand dismissively, refusing to take the threat seriously. "I do not care how many ships they have or how advanced their weapons are," he declared. "These humans are relics from a forgotten age, and they will learn that the galaxy has moved on without them." He turned to his communications officer and smiled with cruel anticipation. "Send a message to the Council," he ordered. "Tell them that their mythical saviors will die alongside them. Tell them that the Dominion does not fear ghosts and legends." The message was broadcast across all channels, and it reached the human fleet as they approached Council Space Commander. Harris listened to the Archon's threats without any change in his expression. "He thinks we are weak because we are old," he said quietly. "He thinks that 10,000 years of isolation made us soft and afraid." Captain Cole stood beside him on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the stars streak past as they traveled through hyperspace. "What do you want us to do, sir?" he asked. Harris turned to face the view screen, his eyes hard with determination. "I want us to show him what humanity has been doing for the last 10,000 years, he replied. "I want us to remind the galaxy why our ancestors became legends in the first place." Lieutenant Drake looked up from her tactical console with a fierce smile on her face. "The fleet is ready, Commander," she announced. "All 200 ships are standing by for your orders." Harris nodded and opened a channel to Ambassador Mitchell, who was traveling aboard a separate vessel. "Ambassador, we are approaching Council space," he said. "I recommend we proceed directly to the Galactic Council chamber and introduce ourselves properly." Mitchell's voice came back calm and steady. "Agreed. Commander, it is time for humanity to step out of the shadows and into the light." The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Council territory, and every sensor station in the region detected their arrival. 200 warships hung in formation, their hulls gleaming, their weapons charged, their crews ready for battle, and on every world that received the sensor data, beings of all species looked up at the sky and realized that the myths had come to life. The Galactic Council chamber was packed with representatives from every member species, and all of them had come to witness the moment that would define their civilization's future. Councillor Zevran stood at the central podium, trying to maintain his composure as the doors at the far end of the hall slowly opened. Commander Daniel Harris walked in first, his boots echoing against the polished floor. With each measured step behind him came Ambassador Laura Mitchell, Captain Nathan Cole, Lieutenant Megan Drake, and a dozen other human officers, each one carrying themselves with quiet confidence. The chamber fell completely silent as the humans made their way to the speaking platform, and thousands of alien eyes followed their every movement. Harris stopped at the podium and looked out at the assembled counselors, taking a moment to meet as many eyes as possible before he spoke. 10,000 years ago, humanity made a promise to this galaxy, he began, his voice strong and clear. We swore that if darkness ever threatened the stars again, we would return to stand beside you. He paused and let his words sink in before continuing. Many of you believed we were myths, stories invented to give hope during desperate times, and I do not blame you for doubting our existence. Councillor Siron shifted uncomfortably in her seat, remembering how she had mocked the idea of humans just days ago. But we are real, Harris continued. We are flesh and blood, just like you, and we have come to honor the oath our ancestors made. He gestured to Ambassador Mitchell, who stepped forward and activated a holographic display. During our 10,000 years of isolation, humanity did not simply hide and wait, Mitchell explained. We rebuilt our civilization, we advanced our technology, and we trained our military for the day when we might be needed again. The display showed images of human cities, factories, shipyards, and training facilities, all of them vast and impressive beyond anything the Council had ever seen. We never forgot our promise, Mitchell said. Every generation passed down the stories of the First Shadow War, and every generation prepared themselves to answer the call if it ever came. Councillor Siren raised her hand and stood up, her expression skeptical despite the evidence before her eyes. Forgive me, Ambassador, but words and images are easy to produce, she said. How do we know that you actually possess the strength to fight the Dominion? Several councillors nodded in agreement, still hesitant to place their faith in beings from ancient legends. Harris smiled slightly and nodded to Lieutenant Drake. Show them, he said. Drake activated another display, and the chamber was suddenly filled with holographic footage of human military exercises. Warships moved in perfect formation, executing complex maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Ground forces advanced across simulated battlefields, their weapons and armor far more advanced than anything in the Council's arsenal. Fighter craft screamed through the void, engaging holographic enemies with precision and speed that left the councillors gasping. This is just training footage, Harris said as the display ended. This is what we do to stay sharp during peacetime. The chamber was silent for a long moment before Councillor Vethrak spoke up. And what about actual combat? He asked. Training is one thing, but real battle is another. Harris nodded and pulled up another set of records. During our isolation, we were not entirely alone, he explained. Several hostile species attempted to invade our territory over the centuries, and we repelled every single attack. The footage showed human ships engaging alien fleets, and the results were devastatingly one-sided. Enemy vessels were torn apart by human weapons, their hulls shattered, and their crews scattered into the void. We did not seek out these conflicts, Harris said firmly. But when war came to us, we ended it quickly and decisively. High Councillor Zevran leaned forward, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Commander Harris, are you saying that humanity has been fighting wars for 10,000 years? He asked. We have been defending ourselves, Harris corrected gently. There is a difference, He turned to face the entire council, his expression growing more serious. The Dominion believes they are the greatest military power in the galaxy. And perhaps they were until today, but they have never faced humanity in battle. And they have no idea what they are about to encounter. At that moment, a communication alert sounded throughout the chamber. High Counselor, we are receiving a transmission from the Dominion flagship. An officer announced. Deveran nodded permission, and the image of Archon Kethra appeared on the main display. The Dominion warlord looked at the humans with contempt in his eyes. So these are the legendary humans, he sneered. They look no different from any other weak species I have conquered. Harris stepped forward and met the Archon's gaze without flinching. Archon Kethra, I am Commander Daniel Harris of the Earth Defense Force, he said calmly. I am offering you one chance to withdraw your forces from Council space and return to your own territory. Kethra laughed, a harsh and cruel sound that echoed through the chamber. You dare to threaten me? He demanded. You are nothing but ghosts from a forgotten age, and I will crush you along with these pathetic counselors. Harris remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. This is your only warning, he said. Withdraw now, or face the consequences. Kethra's eyes burned with rage, and he leaned closer to the screen. I will enjoy destroying you. Human, he spat, I will make an example of your fleet, and then the galaxy will see that their precious legends were nothing but lies. The transmission ended, and the chamber fell silent once more. Harris turned back to the council and spoke in a voice that carried absolute certainty. Admiral Kevin Price is standing by with our full fleet, he announced. When the Dominion attacks, and they will attack, we will be ready. He looked at Zevran and nodded slowly. The myths are about to go to war. High Counselor, and the galaxy is about to remember why humanity became legend. The Varith system was about to become the most important battlefield in galactic history, and every being who could watch was holding their breath. High Counselor Zevran stood in the command center of the orbital station, surrounded by tactical displays that showed the approaching Dominion fleet. 500 warships advanced in perfect formation, their weapons charged and their crews hungry for conquest. The Dominion fleet will reach engagement range in 10 minutes, a center officer reported. Her voice trembling with fear. Zevran looked at the Council's combined defense force, 300 vessels from dozens of different species, and he knew it would not be enough. But then his eyes moved to another section of the display, where 200 human warships waited in silence. Commander Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the command ship Resolute, watching the enemy approach with calm determination. Admiral Price, report fleet status, he said into his communicator. All ships are at full combat readiness. Admiral Kevin Price responded from his position aboard the carrier Valiant. Weapons are hot, shields are up, and pilots are standing by. Captain Nathan Cole was aboard the Endeavor at the front of the formation, his crew tense but ready. Commander, the Dominion is hailing us, Lieutenant Megan Drake announced from her tactical station. Ignore it, Harris replied. We are done talking. Archon Kethra sat on his throne aboard the Dominion flagship Conquest, watching the human fleet with amusement. Look at them, he said to Overseer Malloys. They actually think they can stop us with only 200 ships, Malloys nodded, though a small voice in his mind whispered that something felt wrong about this situation. All ships, begin the attack, Kethra commanded. Destroy the humans first. I want to shatter their legend before the entire galaxy. The Dominion fleet surged forward, and the battle for the galaxy began. Commander Harris watched the enemy approach and waited until they reached the exact position he wanted. Now, he said quietly, the human fleet moved as one, splitting into 3 groups that flanked the Dominion formation with incredible speed. Admiral Price commanded the center group, drawing the enemy's attention, while the other 2 groups circled around to attack from the sides. They are fast, Malloy said with growing concern. much faster than our projections indicated. Kethra waved away his worry and ordered his ships to concentrate fire on the human center. The humans were not where the Dominion expected them to be. Captain Cole led the Endeavor through a gap in the enemy formation, his ship weaving between Dominion vessels with impossible agility. Lieutenant Drake, target their command ship's shield generators, he ordered. Drake's fingers flew across her console as she calculated firing solutions for weapons that the Dominion had never seen. Before firing now, she announced. A beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the Endeavor and struck the Conquest's port shield array, overloading it in a cascade of sparks and explosions. Kethra stumbled as his flagship shook from the impact. What was that? He demanded. One ship should not be able to damage us like that. Malthus checked the sensor readings and felt his blood run cold. My lord, the human weapons are cutting through our shields like they do not exist, he reported. Their technology is far more advanced than anything in our database across the battlefield. Human ships were tearing through Dominion formations with ruthless efficiency. The Council fleet watched in stunned amazement as vessels that they had feared for months were being destroyed by the dozens high. Councillor Zevran gripped the railing in front of him, unable to believe what his eyes were showing him. They are magnificent, he whispered. Commander Harris coordinated the battle from the Resolute, issuing orders that adapted to every move the Dominion made. Group 2, push through their left flank, he commanded. Group 3, cut off their retreat vector. Admiral Price led the center group in a devastating charge that split the Dominion formation in half. All ships, target their capital vessels, Price ordered. Take out their command structure. The human fleet obeyed without hesitation, and Dominion flagships began to explode one after another. Archon Kethra watched his empire crumble around him and felt something he had never experienced before in his entire life. Fear. How is this possible? He screamed. There are only 200 ships against our 500. Malthus had no answer because the evidence before him defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans fought like no species the Dominion had ever encountered, anticipating every move, countering every strategy, and striking with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Captain Cole brought the Endeavor around for another attack run on the Conquest. Their shields are down to 40%. Drake reported. One more pass should finish them. Cole nodded and pushed the ship forward, determined to end this battle once and for all. But Kethra was not ready to accept defeat, and he ordered every remaining ship to focus fire on the Endeavor. Kill that ship, he screamed. Destroy them. A wall of energy blasts converged on Cole's vessel, and for a moment it seemed like the Endeavor would be overwhelmed. Then Admiral Price brought the Valiant and 12 other human ships into the line of fire. Absorbing the attack meant for their comrade, Cole. Finish the mission, Price said calmly as his ship shuddered under the assault. We have got you covered. Cole did not hesitate, pushing the Endeavor forward until he was directly above the Conquest. Fire everything, he ordered. The Endeavor unleashed its full arsenal, and the Dominion flagship's remaining shields collapsed under the onslaught. Kethra felt his ship dying around him and knew that his empire had just ended. This is impossible, he whispered as emergency alarms screamed throughout the bridge. They were supposed to be myths. Commander Harris watched the Conquest go dark on his tactical display and opened a channel to all human ships. The flagship is disabled, he announced. Continue engaging remaining Dominion forces until they surrender or withdraw. The battle lasted another 2 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. By the time the last Dominion ship fled into hyperspace, the human fleet had proven beyond any question that the legends were true. And across the galaxy, beings of every species watched the recordings of the battle and realized that everything had changed. The silence that followed the battle was heavier than any sound could have been, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath as it processed what had just happened. The Dominion fleet was shattered, reduced from 500 warships to fewer than 100 fleeing survivors. Archon Kethra had been captured aboard his crippled flagship, his empire destroyed in a single day by beings he had dismissed as fairy tales. High Counselor Zevran stood in the council chamber once more, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Where there had been fear and despair, now there was hope and wonder, and a sense of witnessing history being written. Commander Daniel Harris walked to the central podium, his uniform still showing signs of the battle, and faced the assembled representatives. The Dominion threat has been neutralized, he announced. Their fleet is broken, their leader is in custody, and their remaining forces are retreating to their home territory. The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Species that had been enemies for centuries, embracing each other in relief and joy. But Harris raised his hand for silence, his expression remaining serious. This victory did not come without cost, he said quietly. 40 human ships were destroyed in the battle, and over 12,000 of our people gave their lives today. The chamber fell silent again, the celebration tempered by the weight of sacrifice. They died protecting species that thought we were myths. Harris continued. They died honoring a promise that was made 10,000 years before any of them were born. High Counselor Zevran stepped forward, his eyes filled with tears and his voice thick with emotion. Commander Harris, I do not have words adequate to express what the Council owes to humanity, he said. You came to save us when we did not even believe you existed, and you paid for that salvation with your own blood. Harris shook his head gently. We did not come for payment or reward. High Counselor, he replied, we came because it was the right thing to do. Ambassador Lara Mitchell joined Harris at the podium, standing beside him as she addressed the council. 10,000 years ago, humanity learned a lesson that shaped our entire civilization, she explained. We learned that true strength is not measured by the ability to conquer, but by the willingness to protect. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of counselors from species she had never seen before today. Our ancestors could have built an empire during the First Shadow War, she said. They could have used their military power to dominate the galaxy, but they chose a different path. Captain Nathan Cole stood in the crowd, listening to the ambassador's words, while Lieutenant Megan Drake stood beside him. They chose to be guardians instead of rulers. Mitchell continued. They chose to defend the weak instead of exploiting them. And that is the legacy we have carried for 10,000 years. Counselor Siren, who had been the most skeptical voice against the humans just days ago, rose from her seat. I owe you an apology. Ambassador, she said, her voice humble and sincere. I called your people myths and fairy tales. I mocked the idea that you could save us. And I was wrong. Mitchell smiled warmly and shook her head. You were being cautious. Counselor, and there is no shame in that, she replied. Belief should be earned, not demanded. Historian Yelvan stepped forward, clutching his ancient texts to his chest like precious treasures. I have spent my entire life studying the legends of humanity, he said, his voice wavering with emotion. But nothing in those legends prepared me for the reality of who you truly are. He turned to face the council, speaking with a passion that silenced every other voice in the chamber. The ancient texts describe humans as warriors, as fighters without equal, that they fail to capture the most important truth about humanity, he declared. Humans do not fight because they love war. They fight because they love peace. They sacrifice themselves not for glory, but for the simple belief that every life has value. Harris listened to the historian's words and felt a deep sense of pride in his species and their long journey through the stars. What happens now? Asked Counselor Vethrak, voicing the question that everyone was thinking. Commander Harris looked at Ambassador Mitchell, who nodded and turned back to the council. "Humanity is returning to the galactic community," she announced. "We will establish diplomatic relations with every species that wishes to be our friend. And we will work alongside the council to build a better future for everyone." She paused and let her words sink in before continuing. "But we must be clear about one thing," she added. "We are not coming back as rulers or overlords. We are returning as partners and allies. Equals among equals." High Counselor Zevran stepped forward and extended his hand to the ambassador, mimicking the human gesture he had learned just days ago. On behalf of the Galactic Council, "I accept your offer of partnership," he said formally, "and I declare this day to be a holiday across all Council space. A day to remember when the legends returned and saved us from destruction." Mitchell clasped his hand warmly, sealing an alliance that would shape the future of the galaxy. Later that evening, Commander Harris stood alone on the observation deck of the Resolute, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly into the darkness. Captain Cole found him there, standing in silence beside his commanding officer. "The Council is planning a memorial for our fallen," Cole reported quietly. "They want to honor every human who died in the battle." Harris nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the stars. "They died well," he said. "They died as heroes, and their names will be remembered for another 10,000 years." Cole hesitated before asking the question that had been on his mind since the battle ended. "Do you think this is what our ancestors wanted?" he asked. "Do you think they would be proud of what we did today?" Harris turned to look at his captain, and for the first time since the crisis began, he allowed himself to smile. "I think they would be proud that we kept our promise," he replied. "I think they would be proud that humanity chose to be guardians when we could have been conquerors." He looked back out at the stars, where somewhere in the distance, new challenges and new threats were surely waiting. "The galaxy thought we were myths," he said quietly. "They thought we were ancient history, forgotten legends from a time that no one remembered." He straightened his shoulders and felt the weight of 10,000 years of preparation settle comfortably into place. "But now they know the truth," he continued. "Now they know that humanity never forgot, never stopped preparing, and never abandoned our promise." Cole nodded and stood beside his commander as the stars wheeled slowly past the observation window. "What do we do now, sir?" he asked. Harris smiled and turned away from the window, ready to face whatever the future would bring. "Now we do what we have always done, Captain," he replied. "We watch, we wait, and we protect. Because that is what humanity does, and that is what we will always do." And somewhere in the galaxy, beings of every species looked up at their skies and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. They felt safe, knowing that the legends were real and that humanity was watching over them once again.